Welcome everyone to the Office of State Procurement training course on deficiency complaints, also referred to as complaint forms. This class is being presented by myself, Felicia Saunier. I'm an Assistant Director with the Office of State Procurement, and
also Tom Ketterer, the Deputy Director in the Office of State Procurement.
The objectives of the course are to define what a deficiency complaint is, to discuss how to handle contract vendor issues, to debut our new and improved OSP complaint form, which we are really excited about. The new form will provide easier opportunities for it to be completed and to be submitted to our office. And we are really excited to debut it today. The objectives are also to describe when to use a complaint form, to show you where to find our new complaint form, to go over the deficiency complaint process, to discuss the potential outcomes regarding a deficiency complaint, and to also discuss the importance of completing and submitting a complaint form to our office. So the first thing I would like to remind everyone are all of the steps involved in a procurement, which are typically referred to as the procurement life cycle. So the first absolutely important thing that needs to be done is you need to define your need, not your want, but your need. You need to next select the procurement method, and if you need to bid the item, and you need to then build the solicitation. You publish the solicitation. Once the bids are received, you will evaluate it, make your award. The vendor will deliver, and you will need to receive and inspect the goods, and then make payment when appropriate. As you can see, there are many steps involved in the procurement process. And even though every effort is made in each step to end up with a successful procurement, sometimes things may not go as smoothly as we would like or hope, which may result in the need to file a deficiency complaint.
So what is a deficiency complaint? The deficiency complaint is when there are ongoing problems related to either late or no delivery. Sometimes it is inferior merchandise is received. On some occasions, the vendor will take it upon themselves to do a product substitution without prior approval, or in the case of services, the agency will either receive poor service, or in the worst case scenario, will not receive any service at all. Anytime you have ongoing problems such as these that you cannot resolve yourself, it is necessary for you to file a deficiency complaint.
So here's a question for everyone. What should an agency do if a vendor does not deliver as specified, or the service that's being provided by the vendor is of poor quality? Well, anytime a vendor is not performing their contract properly, whether it be for a one-time buy, a blanket order, or a statewide contract, agencies should take the following steps. The first thing would be to contact the vendor directly to see whether or not you can resolve the issue internally. Sometimes it only takes one phone call to the vendor to discuss the issue. And if you're able to resolve the issue at that time, just document your procurement file regarding whether or not you had a phone call or if there was any correspondence, and that information, again, should be in your procurement file. If the call or the communication does not resolve the problem, agencies should fill out the complaint form. So as I stated at the beginning, one of the objectives of the course is to debut our new form. We've improved it. We hope that you will like it. We hope that you will find it easier to complete and to submit to our office. The one major thing that we would like to point out this morning is that we have changed the title of our form. For those of you who are familiar with the form, you will see that the old form was titled Deficiency Complaint. Well, our new form has been titled Complaint Form. Also today, we will be introducing a new process which will be implemented for those of you that deal with professional service contracts. So the new form should be completed and included with all termination requests submitted by the agency for any professional service contract, also known as PSCs. So this is just a screenshot to show you what the old form looked like. And this is the top of the form, and this is a screenshot of how our new form looks. Again, a screenshot of the old form, the bottom part of it, and this is a screenshot of the bottom part of it.
So you have either a product or service that is not meeting your requirements, and you have issues that you cannot resolve. So how does an agency go about filing a complaint form? Well, this form is found on OSP's website at the link represented below. If you're not familiar with the OSP website, I encourage you to go out to our website and then just investigate the Agency Center tab because it has a wealth of information. When you go to our website, this is our home page, and as you see at the bottom, there is an Agency Center tab and a Vendor Center tab. If you click on the Agency Center tab, you see all the blocks of information that you can click on that contain, like I said, a wealth of information. Some of the different tabs are, if you're looking for a particular person, we have contact information. We have a new information page with, current memos or proclamations listed under it. You can also get to the PAC and ECAT through those blocks. But to get to the new complaint form, you would click on the Agency Forms tab, which will bring you to this screen. We do have some forms for quasi-agencies, but state agencies would need to click on the agency forms. And here's a list of all the different agency forms that are contained on our website. The current website has the old deficiency complaint report listed on it, which will soon be replaced by our new complaint form, which Felicia said we will be debuting probably later today. So some of the enhancements that we made on the new form, and we have a question from the audience.
They would like to see the web link again, and also they want to know if this may be used for social service contracts.
Okay. Now, I will let everyone know that we will be posting this presentation on our website under the Training Center, so you will be able to access this to, if there's any information that you want to go back and look at. So will it be used for social services contracts? Yes, it will. And there's the link to our website. So as I stated, the complaint form does have a lot of new functionality built into it. It is a fillable form, PDF form, with the capability of a submit button, which will transmit it to our office. The top part of this is a sample of the top part of the form. Of course, the top section is just agency information, exactly what contract or purchase order you're having an issue with, a brief description of the commodity or service, and at the very bottom of that top section, you would need to indicate whether it is a purchasing contract or a professional services contract. And keep in mind, we use the term contract, but this applies to purchase orders also. The next section, and this has a lot of enhancements built into it. You would select, what type of problem are you having with this particular contract? Is it delivery? Is it services not being delivered? Are there issues with billing, inferior quality, whatever the case may be, or of course the other for miscellaneous. So when you click on the correct category as to the nature of your problem, for instance, if it's delivery, and under each section there will be a drop down where you can check whatever the specific issue is you're having. Not delivered by the due date, maybe improper method of delivery, maybe they were supposed to bring it inside and they left it sitting on the loading dock. If the goods are damaged, the wrong item, whatever the issue is with delivery. And like I said, the other categories, services, billing, they were all, if you click on those, they also have drop downs so you can identify the exact nature of your problem. So what are the steps in filing a deficiency complaint on a contract or a purchase order? So the agency should provide any background information. As we stated earlier, the first step when an agency has a problem with a contract is for them to talk to the vendor and try to resolve the problem. If it's not resolved, that's when you need to fill out a complaint form. When you do that, make sure you include any correspondence you've had with the vendor, the person that you communicated with the vendor, and any pertinent information as to what has been done already to try to resolve the issue. If that does not work, then you would submit the complaint form. Once you submit the complaint form to OSP, we will review the information that is sent on the complaint form and any additional correspondence that's submitted, and review it and investigate the issue to try to find out exactly what the problem was and if we need any additional information before proceeding. Once we review it and get all the information needed, we will send a letter and a copy of the complaint form that you submit to our office to the vendor. In that letter, we will briefly summarize the nature of the situation, and we will give the vendor a fairly short time period to respond to our letter. Typically, it's 5 working days. Once the vendor responds, we do ask the vendor to respond with how do they propose to resolve the problem and how will they prevent it from happening in the future. Once the vendor responds and we review their response and we deem it as being acceptable, we will forward the vendor's response to the agency and ask the agency if they're in agreement with what the vendor's plan of action is. If the agency concurs with the vendor's proposed response, then that is the end of the deficiency complaint process, and obviously the most desired outcome of the deficiency complaint. The vendor's proposed response is acceptable, the problem's resolved, and everybody's happy. One important thing to remember is once you run into a situation with the vendor that you cannot resolve, that is when you need to send us the complaint form. In some situations, we will be ready to renew a contract that's been in place for 2 years, or it's at the end of its final renewal, and the agency will say, oh, well, I don't want vendor A to be able to bid on it because we've been having problems with them for 3 years. A lot of times that comes as a surprise to our office because we have not been made aware of the situation, and that is one of the main reasons for the complaint form to allow OSP to be aware of situations and also to get the agency the goods and services that they need. So we have another question.
If an issue is resolved at the agency and vendor level, does OSP still need to be made aware of the issue?
Depending on the nature and magnitude of the problem, if it's a minor issue, and the agency is able to resolve it, we do not need to be made aware of the problem.
How long should we give the vendor to correct the issue?
Once again, it depends on the nature and severity of the problem. If it's something that's fairly simple, and should be able to be resolved with one conversation, then if they can't resolve it, I'd give them one more chance. But it's a case by case analysis and evaluation. And we'll go over some specific examples later in the presentation as to how different levels of problems and how they should be handled. One more question.
Must the submitted complaint form also need to be saved and uploaded to the PO in LeGov?
Must it? It's not a requirement, but it is a good idea in order to have the documentation on the PO or the contract in LeGov. All right, all good questions. So keep in mind that these, once you run across a situation, that's when you should send the complaint form to OSP. Don't put it off and disregard the situation, because we won't be aware of it and we won't have the vendor's record documented with the ongoing problems.
So the next few slides will provide you with examples of a deficiency complaint going through the process that was just described to you by Tom. Wait, we have a question.
Question?
If the form has a submit method, how do you send relevant detail?
Each purchase order and contract has a state procurement analyst on either the purchase order or the contract. You can email any supporting documentation to that state procurement analyst. Also, in the course of our investigation, if we need additional information, it will be requested via email.
There was also an enhancement that was made to the form that provides you at the bottom of the form an open box with unlimited character information that you can type in all of the pertinent information regarding the complaint. And once we receive the complaint form and we vet it, if there is additional information that we will need, that is the main reason why we need your contact information on that form, so that we can contact you if we feel that we need additional information. Okay, so on the screen, you will see an old deficiency complaint form on our old form that was submitted to our office. And as you can see, there was an agency that had a pest control service with a vendor, and they were running into issues with the pest control contractor. The agency states that they requested that they come out at a specific time, and apparently the contractor wasn't complying with the delivery time that they were supposed to come out to actually render the services. So the complaint form, as Tom mentioned earlier, was submitted to our office. Our office reviewed the complaint form. We considered it a legitimate complaint, and so our next step was to draft a letter to be sent to the vendor. And typically what we do is that we will enclose with the letter a copy of the complaint form that we received from the agency. So please keep that in mind. We will attach a copy of the complaint form to the letter that is being sent to the vendor. So please make sure that your complaint form doesn't include statements such as, I think the contractor is trash, or, we need to be dealing with a legitimate contractor. So just make sure that the language that you include on your form is
professional.
Professional, yes, thank you, Tom, professional language that you wouldn't mind the contractor seeing. So, as you can see, we ask that the contractor respond back to our office by a certain date, and we also ask them to state their intentions regarding the matter and how they plan on resolving it, and also how they intend on preventing this from happening again. So the next one is the response back from the vendor. As you can see, they submitted their response back to us via email, which is satisfactorily, as long as it addresses everything that we had in the letter. So we will look at the reply back from the vendor, and if we feel that it has complied with the letter that we submitted to them, we will submit this to the agency for their review. So the agency will need to look at the response back from the vendor, and they will need to let us know whether or not it's acceptable to them. Hopefully, the agency will say that the response is acceptable, and then no further action will be needed. Again, all of this documentation will be included in the procurement file, as well as the vendor file that is maintained at the Office of State Procurement. It's really important that it's included because of any further actions that we may need to take against the vendor. So I'll stop right here, and we have a question.
How is the complaint sent to the vendor? Email, certified mail, how?
It is typically emailed to the vendor.
The next question, does the submission process of complaint form generate a success or failure notification?
To the Office of State Procurement? I'm assuming that you're asking whether or not once you submit the button, whether or not you will receive a notification that it has been submitted and received. That's an awesome question. I'm not sure whether or not you will receive any sort of a notification.
You will not receive a delivery notification. However, there have been situations where there was a technical difficulty on the website and it did not submit, and it gave that agency an error saying it did not submit. And at the bottom of the form, there's a footnote that says if you are unable to submit online, email it to, and there's an email address in the event that you have difficulty submitting it online. And that's also an enhancement that wasn't on the old form.
So once we send the response from the vendor to the agency, if the agency is still dissatisfied, then we will start discussing other options for actions against the vendor. Typically at this point, we may need to have legal involved because it may result in us having to do a contract controversy.
So the potential outcomes when a deficiency complaint is filed. First one is the problem is resolved, and that's obviously the one that we all hope for when situations like this arise. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, and in some situations, and this gets back to what I said earlier about some of the questions about how do you handle different situations. It depends on the severity of the situation, exactly what the issues are. But in some situations, the contract may be immediately canceled. We have had situations where vendor forgery was involved, required license by vendors have been lost, and we had to immediately cancel contracts. Another outcome is the vendor can be placed in default. And I'll cover the details of what a default is. And the last one, and probably the most difficult one to handle, is a deficiency complaint could result in a contract controversy. So when a vendor is placed in default, how that process works is, the vendor has been unable to provide the goods or services that are outlined in the PO or the contract. And the state reserves the right to go to the next lowest bidder or to purchase the goods or services on the open market. And the vendor that was in default of the contract can be charged whatever the additional cost to the state is to obtain those goods and services. If they're placed in default and surcharged the difference in the cost, then they are not allowed to bid on any future solicitations until that surcharge is paid back to the agency. So contract controversy, that's anytime there's a disagreement or dispute between the state and a contract holder. And once again, this is, like I said, the most difficult situation to handle because the vendor is entitled to due process, and there is a legal process that we have to go through in order to resolve a contract controversy. Typically, it's a situation where the vendor or the state is saying, yes, you should have provided this product, or you should have done this, but you didn't, and there's a dispute where the parties don't agree on what the actual contract requirements are. So a contract controversy does take time to resolve and work out and work through the due process. So potential actions taken with the vendor. There are situations where it can result in a vendor being suspended from doing business with the state. Once again, depending on the severity of the situation. Obviously, if they lose their license, they can no longer do business with anybody. In the case of the forgery, the vendor was suspended for a certain amount of time from doing business with the state.
We have a question.
We have a question.
For the rule on if you owe money you cannot bid, how do you track that for entities? If the same group creates a new LLC or similar to bid, how far would the rule apply? Does it follow the managers into other LLCs?
Well, that's a good question. However, if they created another company, we probably wouldn't be able to track their payment back to that new entity. And we have had situations where a company does have 2 or 3 DBAs or different names, but that's a difficult one to track. But if it is a new entity, then it would not be applicable to the debt would not follow to the new company. Okay, so additional actions taken with the vendor. Like I said, sometimes it leads to immediate cancellation. That's the forged document example, losing a license, etc. And unfortunately, in most cases, we cannot prevent, even though we have a complaint form and a deficiency complaint against a vendor, a lot of agencies think that that means that that vendor is not able to bid on upcoming opportunities. Unfortunately, the vendor has to go through due process to become debarred from doing business with the state, which takes more than just some minor complaint forms against them for that to take place. However, in extreme situations and repeated violations, we have had situations where agencies have been debarred, and that's when they can no longer conduct business with the state and respond to bid opportunities. Oh, vendors cannot respond. Sorry about that. Okay, so hopefully you've been paying attention because we're going to give you a test.
So we have come up with a few scenarios that we would like you to let us know if the issue is worthy or unworthy of a complaint form. So if you would, please participate and enter into the chat section either the word worthy or unworthy. So if you're ready, here goes. The first scenario, the vendor does not meet the delivery requirements of the contract on their first delivery. We'll give you a few minutes to enter in the chat whether or not you think this is worthy or unworthy of a complaint form. Okay, so for those of you who typed in unworthy, you are absolutely correct. The agency should call the vendor and discuss the contract delivery requirements and expectations with the vendor. This is what we would consider to be a minor issue. As you know, a lot of times when you have a bid, there is one person that will sign the bid, such as the president or the vice president, and the person that you're dealing with regarding the delivery is probably the salesperson or the sales manager. And the sales manager doesn't always know what terms and conditions were included in the bid that was signed by the president. So if you call them and you point out where in the bid it said that delivery needed to be made, say for instance, within 7 days, the salesperson normally will say, I wasn't aware of that, I will make sure that I deliver on time the next time. Again, it's considered a minor infraction. You call them, the situation is resolved, and you can put this matter to rest.
Okay, the second scenario. The vendor does not ever meet the delivery time requirements of the contract, even after the agency has expressed concerns and told the vendor how important the timely delivery is to them. Worthy or unworthy of a complaint form? Well, the responses are rolling in. Okay, if you typed in worthy, that is correct. So in this situation, as we mentioned previously, the agency should try to address the problem, and the definition of a deficiency complaint is when there are ongoing issues with the problem. So in this situation, the agency was unable to get the vendor to understand and to comply with the delivery time requirements. So a complaint form is needed in this situation. Next one.
Okay, the next situation. A janitorial service forgets to empty the garbage can in the bathroom one weekend. Let's see those replies coming in. Okay, if you chose unworthy, again, you are absolutely correct. The agency should again call the vendor, bring this to their attention, review the scope of work requirements with them, and hopefully this will resolve the issue. This is one of those situations that we consider to be minor, and with janitorial services, typically there are multiple people that are actually doing the service, and you know how that works sometimes. One person may have thought they emptied the garbage can, and the other one thought the opposite. So it's a minor infraction. Call the vendor, bring it to their attention, and typically that will resolve this issue.
You have a janitorial service that has not replenished the hand soap in the bathrooms after you've reminded them repeatedly to do so. Worthy or unworthy of a complaint form? So worthy is the correct answer. Once again, the agency has talked to the vendor, made them aware of the situation, and is still having an ongoing issue with no soap in the bathrooms. And as we all know in today's world, that's very, very, very important.
Okay, the next situation is the vendor delivers the wrong size envelopes, but you call them and they have agreed to deliver the correct size within 2 days. Is this worthy or is it unworthy of a complaint form? If you chose unworthy, again, you are absolutely correct. You call the vendor, you pointed out what the situation is, and they have agreed to resolve it within a timely manner.
Okay, and the last one we have, and this is this did actually happen at one of our agencies. You have security guard service that has an armed employee that accidentally discharges their weapon in the employee break room and the bullet goes through the wall. Is this worthy or unworthy of a complaint form? So, obviously worthy due to the seriousness of the situation. It needed to be reported to OSP immediately, documented in the file, and immediate corrective action was taken regarding this situation due to the severity and seriousness and nature of the incident.
We got a double worthy.
Oh. Somebody said that one was worthy.
So we hope these scenarios have kind of given you an idea of when a situation would be worthy of a complaint form and when a situation would not be worthy of a complaint form. So why is it important to complete and submit a complaint form to our office? Well, again, it will assist in resolving any agency problems with the vendors. It will provide documentation for the contract files that may be needed for any future reference or any future situations that arise with the vendor to assist us in resolving it or maybe moving to the possibility of debarring the vendor. It will provide justification, again, for any future actions that may need to be taken to address any ongoing issues with the vendor. And the information can also be used for legal reference if needed, if the situation results in us having to go through a contract controversy or going as far as having to suspend the vendor or debarring the vendor.
So the next two slides are flow charts of the process that we've been talking about the last 30 minutes or so. And as I mentioned previously, these presentations will be posted on our website under the training tab. So we're not going to go back through the steps in the process, but if you have a situation and actually need to file a deficiency complaint, you can refer back to this flow chart as to the exact process that it goes through. And the first flow chart is the ideal situation when the complaint form actually resolves the situation, and as we stated earlier, that's the end of the process and everybody's happy. The second flow chart are the additional steps that are taken if the issue is not resolved and some of the potential outcomes and actions that may be taken against the vendor if not resolved.
Okay, so that is the end of our presentation on complaint forms. We have some awesome questions. Do we have any other additional questions? It appears that we don't have any additional questions, so we would really like to thank everyone for attending. We are hoping that the information was very helpful, that the information was informative, and we hope that we met the objectives of the course that were identified at the very beginning of the presentation. So again, if you go out to our website today, you will probably see our old form. Give us a few days and you will find our new form out there. If you run into any issues with completing the form, please do not hesitate to contact our office and we will do everything that we can to assist you.
And once again, thank you all for joining us for the deficiency complaint session, and then give us just a few minutes and we will start the performance evaluation session.
Good morning. We're here today to talk to you about performance evaluations for the Office of State Procurement, also known as PEs. The objectives of this course are to understand the purpose of performance evaluations.
So, at the end of this course, you will have a better understanding of the purpose of performance evaluations. You will also have a better understanding of the importance of performance evaluations in the contract process.
You'll know when performance evaluations are required, and you'll know how and where to submit performance evaluations. By way of introduction, this is Pam Rice. I'm an Assistant Director in the Office of State Procurement over the professional contracts side of the house.
And I'm Clarissa Johnson, Manager for the Professional Contracts team.
So even though we're on the professional services side, this presentation covers both sides of the Office of State Procurement, because performance evaluations are applicable to both sides of our house, whether you're dealing with commodities, bids, services contracts, or any other type of contract that comes through the Office of State Procurement. I like to think of performance evaluations as contractor report cards. At the end of your contract, your bid, or whatever the term may be, you have an overall impression of your relationship with the contractor. How did they do? Would you hire them again? If this was an Amazon review, how many stars would you give them? Thumbs up or thumbs down? These performance evaluations are required for purchasing contracts and also for professional services contracts. So this is a copy of an old performance evaluation form that our office had used, actually the Office of State Purchasing had used, and it was required to be filled out on paper and then printed off and mailed in. What we've done is trying to improve the process, make it easier for the agencies, and also to improve the information that we're collecting. So this is a new fillable performance evaluation form that can be used for whether you're describing a purchasing contract, a professional services contract, or a contract from an RFP, which could go on either side of the house. So when you open the form, you'll see the selections here, and the form will adapt to whichever box that you're checking. So first off, we're going to talk about when purchasing PEs are applicable. So performance evaluations are required for any renewals because agency feedback is needed on the performance of the contractor, the quality of the merchandise or the service, how effective they were, and any modifications you might have for going forward. State procurement will use your feedback to determine if the contract should be renewed or if a new bid needs to be solicited because the vendor just wasn't performing well. So in this case, we're selecting purchasing contract, and the form is asking you for information on your agency's name, your contact information, the contract number, the expiration date, and the name of the evaluator and their contact information, and of course, the name of the vendor. So the name of the evaluator should be someone who's familiar with the contract, not just an administrative person, because if we need the information verified later or need more details, we would know who to contact. So the form provides an opportunity for you to rate the vendor. Very satisfactory, satisfactory, needs improvement, or poor. This is on the purchasing side. On the PC side, there are only a couple selections, but that's because of the way the law was written. The form does give you unlimited space to list the services, the deliverables, how the quality was, and any problems or opportunities for improvement. So, This is a screenshot of a section of the form. You can see that you have the boxes to check for their performance rating. Then you have an opportunity to rate them in different areas, such as their customer service. Were they courteous and professional? Did they return phone calls timely? On delivery, did they meet the delivery time? Were there frequent back orders? Did they deliver proper quantities? Now, this section of the form may not be applicable to a services contract, so you would just hit NA. But for most of these categories are applicable to every contract. So the form also gives you unlimited space to list the deliverables and the quality and any problems that you had. And this is your chance to give comments on opportunities for improvement. And the form will go to the Office of State Procurement. The purchasing analyst who handles the commodity can use that when preparing the next solicitation. So your comments and your feedback really is important to ensuring that things are done well going forward. The form can be submitted electronically, or if for some reason it's not working, you can print it off and email it to our help desk. So the PE forms on the purchasing side are needed for statewide contracts. At renewal time, our OSP purchasing analyst will email the form link to your agency if your agency was one of the top 80% of the agency contract users. For agency term contracts, if your agency wants to renew with the vendor, you must complete a performance evaluation and submit to OSP. So for agency term contracts, these evaluations are due before requesting a renewal to OSP. Also, for any statewide or agency term contracts, they'll not be renewed unless the PE is completed. If you happen to be using an emergency contingency contract, the PE will be due 3 months after the emergency declaration in which you used that contract. So now we're going to talk to you about professional services contracts, PEs.
Okay, so what's the purpose of submitting a professional service performance evaluation? The using agency is responsible for preparing a final report once performance has been completed from a personal, professional, consulting, or social service contract. The final report should contain an assessment of the utility of the final product, and it should also include an overall evaluation of the contract's performance. At this point, I am showing you what the form looks like. So later on in this course, we're going to show you where to find the performance evaluation form. So if you're submitting a performance evaluation for a professional service contract, which included the consulting, professional, personal, or consulting service, you will need to check the professional service contract box to start filling out the form. Okay, so I'm going to go over some information that you will need to include when submitting your performance evaluation for a professional service contract. So you will need to enter the contact information for your agency and overall performance rating. Give us some details regarding the contract, the contract's description of services, and this information is some of the services outlined in the contract scope of work. You will also need to list the deliverables, the quality of the deliverables, and any problems or issues encountered during the contract process, and any opportunities for improvement. When are performance evaluations due for professional service contracts. They are due 60 days within the completion of services. So if the contract terminates for whatever reason, if it terminates early, it's due, you can submit it then, or if the contract terminates on its original due date, just say if the contract began on July 1st, 2019, and it originally ended on June 30th, 2020, the performance evaluation would be due 60 days from that date of June 30th, 2020.
Okay, we have a question.
They would like to know, has this form been updated as well?
So this form has been updated on our website as of a few days ago.
One more. Is the PCPE saved as a PDF so we can upload into PROAC?
It is a PDF form, and it can be submitted.
Previously, you stated that the fields at the bottom of the form have unlimited space. Does this mean that the fields will expand for printing, or will those extensive comments need to be printed on another sheet?
So they do expand. I'm not sure if you're going to be writing several paragraphs, or if you have a very lengthy explanation, you may need to add additional sheets.
Are we required to use this form for PC, or can we use our existing form?
I'm not sure what your existing form is. This is a required form for PC because the statute provides that you have to state whether it's satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and this is a new form. So I know we have typically, or we have for several years used the same form, but we have updated the form, and it is now available on our website. So if services, as Clarissa was saying, the PE forms on the PC side are due within 60 days of the end date of the contract. Now, if for some reason the services are completed before the contract end date, the PE is due within 60 days of that early completion date.
Did you know, if performance evaluation reports are $250,000 or more, you must submit a copy of that performance evaluation to the Legislative Auditor's Office.
We have a question.
For discussion, they would like you to discuss whether you attach the transaction in LeGov or PROAC or submit otherwise.
So you will need to submit it in PROAC or LeGov. If you're a dot tracking agency, you will, of course, have to submit the performance evaluation in LeGov. But if you are in PROAC, you will need to submit it in PROAC.
Okay. What if we have issues getting final invoice for payment and can't submit by 60 days?
Well, if you're not able to submit within 60 days, you should just try to submit as soon as you can. Be aware that if your agency wants to contract with that vendor again and the performance evaluation isn't submitted, then your agency will not be able to contract again. However, in the scenario you're describing, the vendor, if the vendor's not submitting his invoice, he's not getting paid, then it sounds like there's a problem, and you may not want to be contracting with that vendor again anyway. But
they would like you to state again where the form is located. We've gotten to that yet.
okay, we're going to be talking about that in the next few slides, and we'll show you exactly where you can find it.
Okay. I recently completed PEs for expired contracts. Should I redo the PE using this form?
No, that's not necessary.
Okay. I was told by OSP that the legislative auditor requirement was being fulfilled by the PE submission in PROAC. Is that no longer true?
I'm not aware that the legislative auditor has access to PROAC, so I will need to check on that and get back with you. If you want to email me after this presentation is over, I will talk to you about that. It's PamelaRice@la.gov.
Okay. Are these required for interagency agreements?
PEs are not generally required for interagency agreements. However, if you would like to do them, it certainly can be helpful because there are a lot of contracts on the PC side between universities and agencies. And while we would hope that everything is always done well, that may not always be the case.
Will the monitoring report also be updated?
The monitoring report, I'm not sure what they're asking by that. They could ask a follow-up question. Okay.
Okay, so at this time, we're gonna go over professional services contract termination. So for whatever reason, if your agency decides to terminate their contract early, before the original contract end date, a complaint form is now required. You will need to submit this form to osplegal@la.gov. The information on the complaint form is very helpful for other agencies. It's going to help other agencies make a determination as to whether or not they like the contract with this vendor.
Should we start using this now? We have contracts that we will start processing for fiscal year 21.
Yes.
On the LaGov PC side, does OSP take care of reporting to LLA?
No, I don't believe so. I'm going to have to check into that because this is all new functionality with LaGov.
What if the termination is not an issue of the complaint?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. What we're saying here is that if you're terminating the contract before it was expected to end, then we're assuming that you had a problem with the contractor. So that's why we're asking you to fill out a complaint form. Sometimes agencies will terminate early because they want the relationship to end, and we're not always aware that there was a problem. But if there is a problem, we really do want to know about it, and that's why we're asking you to submit the complaint form.
There are other reasons for early contract termination. Vendor has a new entity, contract being transferred to another agency. The complaint form does not seem useful in these cases.
That's true, but we need to know what the reason is for the termination, and if you state that on the complaint form, then we'll know and we won't ask you any other questions.
If a contract is executed under an agency's delegated authority, should the PE be completed and retained at the agency?
Yes.
What is the revised statute number or rule number for the performance evaluation submittal to LLA?
I don't have that in front of me, but I will get that, and we will either make a slide about this or we will post this on our website.
If the contract is terminated due to budget cuts, do we still need to fill out a complaint form?
Yes. You would fill out the complaint form, but you would state the reason for the termination early was budget cuts.
So whenever you are terminating your contract, it's required that you submit an amendment in LaGov or PROAC, and along with that amendment, you will need to submit a copy of the termination letter the complaint form, and a VA-22 reducing the amount of the contract if that amount was reduced. These documents are required and will have to be submitted in order for us to review them and approve them. You must also ensure that the termination letter gives the agency 30 days before the ending date. Okay, so this screen, it just outlines some information that you will need to fill in on the complaint form. So you will need to include the agency's contact information, the nature of the complaint, the reason for termination, and these forms will be submitted electronically to OSP Legal, as we went over earlier, and you will also need to upload the complaint form in ProAct or LeGov. So for whatever reason, the contract being terminated early, we had a situation where the contractor, he was deceased, and so the contract had to be terminated for that reason. And so on the complaint form, you'll just list the nature of that complaint.
How do you upload the form to LeGov?
Okay, so in LeGov, you'll need to upload it once you submit your amendment. So you will upload it as a submittal under that PO, under that purchase order.
Okay. Is this termination one that is initiated by the agency or by the vendor?
It's submitted by the agency.
I do not submit an amendment for termination. I just send a letter. Will that be sufficient still?
No. We're now requiring an amendment to be submitted whenever there is a termination. Because in some cases, we were finding that LeGov is not reflecting the whole sequence of events, and an amendment needs to be done so that it can be recorded in LeGov.
If the contract being terminated was executed under the agency's delegated authority, does OSP need to be made aware of the termination? And how would that be done if the contract was not entered into ProAct?
The contract would still be entered into LeGov, so there needs to be a record of the termination through LeGov then. One more question.
If the contractor does not exist any longer, how can an amendment be executed?
If the contractor does not exist, I'm not following.
So you may be asking about who would
The
sign for on the contractor's behalf.
If the contractor was deceased, there might be an executor of his estate, or if it's a company, which is more often the case, there should be other officers of the company that could sign when the contract is terminated.
Okay, somebody wanted to point out to the previous question as to where to upload. Maybe they were asking and they said they would use the approval notes and attachments utility to add documents in LeGov.
Mm-hmm.
And then another comment was some contractors go out of business, I guess it's referring to the no longer exist, as the vendor has changed entity names and has ceased to exist.
Okay, we're going to go to the next slide, which are performance evaluations for RFP contracts. So this is another selection from the form. You could select if the contract is resulting from an RFP on the complex services side, which would be an operating service. The form is basically the same. It's just that the statute that's applicable is different, and the report has to be submitted within 120 days of the performance completion.
Okay, go back a little bit. If the contractor has resigned and is unreachable to sign the amendment, can the amendment still be processed attaching the resignation letter?
Okay, we're going to have to discuss that situation with your agency. I believe LDH was asking me that the other day, so if this is LDH, we will talk offline, or another agency, you can send me an email and we can discuss how to deal with that situation. So for the contracts resulting from an RFP on the PC side, like I said, the statute is different that requires the PE, and also the time frame is different. It has to be included in the Gov or PROAC within 60 days after the completion of the performance. And here's another reference to the final evaluation reports being due to the legislative auditor when the contract is greater than $250,000. And as I previously said, that if, on the PC side, if your agency wants to contract with a vendor again, your PE form will be required for you to enter into another contract. All right, so here's where we were telling you the forms would be located. On the OSP website, you know, we have two sides to the website, the purchasing side and the professional services side. So the links are here telling you where the forms will be located, and then we're going to show you exactly where to go. So here you would go to the agency center, which is highlighted below. On the purchasing side, it would be under agency forms. And you can see there's a list of forms, and the one at the bottom is contract performance evaluation. So on the other side of the website, professional contracts, it's going to be under forms, also agency center, forms and formats. And this is where it's located. You can see it's under the list of traditional contract forms that we need, the contract performance evaluation. And that one has recently been updated, so you should be able to find it there today. Are there any other questions?
For multi-year contracts, is performance evaluation required each year or at the end of the contract? If it is required at the end, how should we track the performance each year?
So it's required at the end of the contract by law. However, you are supposed to be tracking the performance because your contract has a contract monitor. So the monitor is supposed to be keeping track of the performance and reviewing all the invoices, reviewing the deliverables, and keeping up with them as their work is progressing. This is an end of the contract report, the PE, but this does not replace the contract monitoring that's supposed to be going on all the time to make sure that the contractor is doing what he was hired to do and what he's being paid to do.
For consulting services, if we have an RFP that we are awarding for, let's say, January 1st, same vendor that is for the current contract, we wouldn't be able to fill out a PE.
Could you repeat that?
For consulting services, if we have an RFP that we are awarding for, let's say, January 1st, same vendor that is in the current contract, we wouldn't be able to fill out a PE. Is that okay?
There's usually, well, there's, if it does happen to be the same vendor, then you would have to submit the PE at the same time as you submit the contract for approval. You don't have to wait till 60 days after the contract end date. You could submit it the day after the contract end date and the day that the new contract is starting. If you're going, say, December 31st, and then the new contract starts January 1, you could submit the PE at the same time you submit the new contract.
Okay. Someone wanted to let us know that the link was not working, so we will check on that. And then a follow-up to your last one, they want to make sure that wouldn't hold up the award, the PE.
No, that wouldn't hold up the award. You can let us know that that's the situation, and we will work with you.
Another comment, in that case, you will not know the amount paid under the prior contract.
That's true. You may not know the exact amount paid, or you may know. It depends on how your contract is worded. But, you could put the original amount that's on the contract, and then you could put a note saying that there might be, outstanding invoices that are left to be paid. And you could also submit a preliminary PE, and then you could come back later and submit a final PE.
Can we find the CF6 amendment form on the OSP website?
The CF6 amendment is something that's used by LDH, I believe, and DCFS. So that is not a standard OSP form. You need to talk to your agency for that.
Okay, I am getting the messages. We're going to look at the links.
Okay, we will check on the links. Yeah, we just noticed that sometimes the forms are linked in multiple places on our website, and it might be correct in one location and not correct in another location. So we have to drill down and search through to make sure that we correct all the links. So just be patient, and we may send out a email list blast once the form is updated to let everyone know that it's there, and also to let everyone know that we have a new form. So thank you for the feedback. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you, and we will check on the legislative auditor statute and respond by adding to our website or adding to the slides next time we do the presentation. So thank you.